Nothing beats injecting a brand new, not battle-scarred, broadcasting-trained, sarcastic zingers and one-liner machine into any political campaign. There's only one possible problem with such an entity: if those sarcastic zingers and one-liners aren't true, as in mistakes and lies. Our third story in the countdown, and you can make it worse, especially when it turns out the sarcastic zingers and one-liner machine has only the one speech which she repeats again and again and again. Because that means the machine, in this case, Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, repeats again and again and again her mistakes and lies. Speaking in Colorado Springs, Governor Palin said that the lending giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had, quote, gotten too big and too expensive to the taxpayers, end quote. However, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were not taxpayer-funded since they were private companies. The first taxpayer funds are the ones being injected right now in the bailout. So much for her grasp of economics and the mortgage crisis. But that's nothing compared to one of Palin's most repeated lines about the infamous Ted Stevens Bridge to Nowhere, the pork barrel congressional earmark that quickly became a national, albeit international, symbol of waste. Palin, again today in Missouri.
I told Congress, thanks but no thanks for that bridge to nowhere.
As we mentioned earlier, that new ad from the McCain campaign asserts that Palin, quote, stopped the bridge to nowhere. But Palin was unquestionably for the project before she was against it. Here's what she said as a candidate in 2006 during the Alaska gubernatorial debate when asked if she would cancel what by that time had become the road to nowhere.
I wouldn't. I'm not going to stand in the way of progress. That our congressional delegation, in the position of strength that they have right now, they're making those efforts for the state of Alaska to build up our infrastructure. I would not get in the way of progress.
And when she became governor, her eventual so-called opposition was at best wishy-washy. She only abandoned the actual bridge after costs rose and it became a national embarrassment. But the money for the original earmark, $223 million, had already been approved by Congress. So Sarah Palin's Alaska began spending it on other transportation projects like the $25 million road to nowhere, which leads to the empty beach where the bridge would have begun, according to the newspaper, the Anchorage Daily News. And now you've also heard about the previous governor's private jet, which she announced to great applause at the Republican convention she had sold by putting it on eBay. And it turned out, A, it wasn't just the governor's jet. It used to transport the large percentage of Alaska's prisoners who have to be farmed out to other states because Alaska doesn't have enough cells. And B, 3 separate times, Governor Palin tried to sell it on eBay, but not once did anybody pony up the minimum bid. The state actually sold the jet, not on eBay, but through an aviation broker. Why aren't you applauding? And remember her heartwarming story about how her kids were disappointed, but she had to fire that chef at the governor's mansion? Not true. That chef, Stephanie Marnin, was first reassigned as a constituent relations assistant in the governor's office and later to the State Museum and the Legislative Lounge, still cooking all the time. Let's welcome into our lounge the Washington editor of The Nation magazine, Chris Hayes. Good to see you in the flesh, sir.
Good to see you, Keith.
Why do Democrats fear Governor Palin? I mean, she seems perfect to me. The world seems to divide to her in those times where she's uninformed or when she's lying.
Well, look, I mean, the reason they fear her is because they fear the culture war, and that's what Sarah Palin represents. I mean, look, the campaign, we saw what happened in Minneapolis. The campaign diverged from a campaign about where the country was going to go and what's happened to a campaign about shooting mooses and selling planes on eBay and firing chefs and all this kind of symbolic rhetoric that Republicans are incredibly expert at and that she wields very deftly.
She loves moose stew. I don't know if you heard about that. This claim, though, that she made, that she as governor did not make any requests for earmarks and Senator Obama did. That doesn't hold up either?
It's a lie. It's frankly a lie. Look, she hired, not only did she request earmarks, she hired a lobbyist to sort of game the system, which is the whole problem, right? If you listen to McCain and Palin with the earmark system, and brought home, what, $22 million? $27 million for this town of 6,000 people. You know, that's orders of magnitude bigger than...
That's a lot.
Yeah, right. So... that even the most basic, and here's the thing, look, they're scouring around to find a maverick, right? So, quote unquote, because they have to run against their own party. And the best they could come up with which is a woman who is a complete business as usual politician in every respect.
What strikes me about the lying, and again, a lot of research has gone into the use of whether or not that word lie is okay, and unfortunately it is. This isn't just wrong details. This is lying to embellish yourself. I fired the chef. Right. I sold the governor's jet. I stopped the bridge to nowhere. I mean, is she eventually going to be claiming, I'm the one who discovered gold in the Yukon in the 1890s?
Well, look, at this point, it matters whether the media calls her on it, frankly. I mean, they are constructing a mythology. From day one, they constructed a mythology around what Sarah Palin was. And the question is whether reality catches up or not, and that's largely in the hands of reporters to call her out.
Well, to that point, her first TV interview is going to be on Thursday. This is 2 weeks after her announcement as VP, and apparently it's all we're going to get for a while unless she does really, really well. What would your top 3 questions be to her, and how likely is Charlie Gibson to just give her a pass on these questions and instead talk about that vital national issue that is hockey mommery?
Well, I'm eternally hopeful and optimistic about Charlie Gibson's performance, although I don't know if that's justified. I would ask her, did anyone from your campaign or the McCain campaign have any interaction with those subject to the abuse of power investigation in Alaska? You have said that you don't believe climate change is man-made. What accounts for the cause of global increases in temperature? And if it's not man-made, then what can we do to stop it?
Well, I know the answer to that one. It's a rival church. Okay, what's the third one?
No, this is the most important. Yeah. What percentage of the federal discretionary budget is spent on the military, and what percentage is spent on earmarks?
Well, I don't think she has an answer for any of those, but
I would be curious to see what she said to
that. Then we're going to hear more about, do you feel you were a victim of sexism? Do you feel you were perhaps a victim of sexism? And do you feel perhaps you were a victim of sexism? Is that not the point ultimately of this, that they saw what happened in the Democratic campaign and said, no, we're not going to get many of Hillary Clinton's voters, but we can grab the martyrdom of many people by just portraying her instantly, and it was instantly assumed that any criticism of her was sexism. That's what this is about.
It's a blatant, craven attempt to essentially reverse engineer what happened in the primary with the Clinton campaign, and it's so sort of. I mean, you can see Senator Obama and a lot of people are just kind of gobsmacked by the whole thing because it's so obvious, it's so blatant. But sometimes obvious works in politics.
And this is, to borrow an old joke from a friend of mine's old show, Arrested Development, and that's why you always vet your vice president, because all of these things, some of these things were disproved in 30 minutes.
Right.
It's fascinating. Chris Hayes, the Washington editor of The Nation magazine, in New York for some reason. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Keith.